What's the ceiling for Tennessee football in 2024? Last year, you had a little bit of a down year compared to what you did in 2022, nearly being able to make it into the playoffs until you had a nightmarish game against South Carolina when they took out Hendon Hooker and they also took out your college football playoff hopes. But going into this season, though, this team has the capability of being able to get into the college football playoffs for the first time in program history. You got Nico Imaviava taking over at quarterback. He should be a massive upgrade from Joe Milton. He was the second overall player from the 2023 recruiting cycle. He was the second best quarterback from that class, and they was flying this dude out taking recruiting visits on the damn private jet. So if you're not taking visits on the private jet, you better be the truth. And I believe that Nico Imaviava definitely is going to be as good as what he's been hyped up to be. He had a really impressive debut in their bowl game win against Iowa. He had 3 rushing touchdowns, and he gives me a lot of Trevor Lawrence vibes. You know, he's really long, big arm, but he's way faster than what Trevor Lawrence is. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be the next Trevor Lawrence, but he has a lot of similarities to him. And he's going to have a really good group of wide receivers to throw the football to last year. And the big reason why Tennessee's offense struggled wasn't all because of Joe Milton being unable to read defenses, not being that accurate. They also dealt with a lot of injuries at this position as well. But you have Squirrel White, Bro McCoy, Dante Thornton coming back. You got a really good transfer in Chris Boswell, who comes from Tulane. He was a top 100 player from this past year's portal cycle. He's long, he's fast, he's super athletic. Last year for Tulane, he caught 44 passes for 711 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. Also look out for true freshman wideout Mike Matthews. He could end up having an immediate impact for the Vols this year as rotational guy. They also have a lot of 4-star guys as depth and rotational pieces, so they're very deep at wideout this year. So if they have a couple of injuries, they should be able to overcome them because they should have that next man up mentality with how deep they are at that position. Now, running back, you lose Jalen Wright and Jabari Small to the NFL, but Dallin Sampson, he takes over as RB1. He was really productive last year, 5.7 yards per attempt, 7 touchdowns, 604 rushing yards. Also look out for Cameron Seldon. He should get a ton of work. He's probably going to be their best pass-catching back on the team this year. And their offensive line returns 3 out of 5 starters from last year. And they also added Lance Hurd, who is a transfer from LSU. He was a 5-star from the 2023 recruiting class, and he was LSU's best player from that recruiting class also. So that definitely was a big loss that the Tigers took, losing him, and it was a big pickup for Tennessee this year. He's expected to be a plug-and-play guy at left tackle this year. And one thing that people don't give Tennessee enough credit for is how physical this team was. Not just on the offensive line with their ability to be really good at opening up holes in the run lane, but they had one of the better defensive lines in college football this year. And going into the 2024 season, this is probably the best defensive line in college football. If not, they're definitely in the conversation for being one of the best. And they're led by James Pierce Jr., who's expected to be a top 5, top 3 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. Not only do they have a lot of depth, but they have a lot of quality starters on this D-line who probably are going to be day 2 guys in next year's draft as well. Their linebacker unit is really good. The biggest concern with Tennessee is the fact that they lose 5 starters from the secondary, which is a big question mark. But the thing with Tennessee is that I never felt like they've gotten good secondary play. And it's really hard to have a great defense where your offense is as fast as what Tennessee's is, because your defense is always going to be at a disadvantage because they're going to be on the field for way more mini snaps than what you would like them to be. But looking at their schedule, it's pretty favorable considering the tough schedules that a lot of other teams have to deal with this year in the SEC. You got Chattanooga, NC State, Kent State. Those should be easy wins for you. Maybe not NC State. That might be a little bit of a tight game, but I expect you to win that one. So you're 3-0 going into your first big road test of the year against Oklahoma. That's a game that could go either way. I like Oklahoma a lot too. They definitely are a team that, like you, is capable of being able to make it into the 12-team college football playoffs. And then after your bye week, you catch a break because your next 2 games are definitely wins. You got Arkansas on the road. You got Florida. You should be able to beat both of those 2 teams. So at this point, let's say you're able to beat Oklahoma on the road. So you're 6-0 going into your home game against Alabama. And going up against Kalen DeBoer is not going to be an easy game for you, but you do have the luxury of playing them in Rocky Top. And we remember what happened the last time Tennessee hosted Alabama at home. They came away with the win back in 2022. Then you get another bye week before you get into the easier part of your schedule. UK, you should be able to take care of business against the Wildcats this year. I think they're more of a above average team this year, but I don't really think they're quite on your level unless Brock Vandagriff just plays out of this world. You got Mississippi State. They're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the SEC this year. I doubt you beat Georgia this year only because you're playing them on the road. And then you got UTEP and Vandy to close out the season. The ceiling, in my opinion, for Tennessee this year, this may sound like I'm being a little bit crazy and I might be overhyping this team just a tad bit, but 11 wins is the ceiling for the Vols, in my opinion, for this season. You're going to have a really good offensive line returning 3 out of 5 starters. You're also going to be really deep at wide receiver. You got Nico Imaviava taking over for you at quarterback. And if he's as good as what he's been hyped up to be, he should be what is the difference and you being able to get into the 12-team college football playoffs and maybe winning a playoff game. And your defense, with how good your defensive line is going to be, that should help your secondary out a lot because they're not going to have to cover these wide receivers for that long, especially when you have a guy like James Pierce who's as good as a pass rusher as what he is. I'm really excited about the potential that Tennessee football has in 2024. If everything goes right, I could definitely see them being a 11-1 team. Possibly they end up making that trip to Atlanta, because even if you lose to Georgia, there's a good chance that you might not have to worry about them into the college football playoffs because they could end up losing 2 games with just how tough their schedule is. They have to go on the road, and I believe they have to play Alabama, Texas on the road, Ole Miss on the road. So Georgia has a very difficult schedule. I could definitely see Georgia losing 2 games this year, and you definitely have the capability of only being able to lose 1, which may be to Georgia. So I definitely see the ceiling for Tennessee being 11 wins this year. I definitely think that a lot of people are kind of sleeping on them. They never get talked about in the national media at all. So I'm really high on Tennessee this year. If I had to give you an overall record prediction, I probably have them at 10-2 this year. And 10-2 is still good enough for you to qualify for a spot in the college football playoffs, because that means that you're at least going to be able to beat Alabama or Oklahoma, which should be 2 quality wins for you. And Alabama, they're a top 10 team in their own right. I love Kalen DeBoer. And Oklahoma, they're a team that's under the radar too. So I think that 10-2 should be good enough for you to get into the college football playoffs. But if everything goes right, and let's say you only have 1 loss, rather it be against Oklahoma or Georgia on the road, you definitely should be a lock to get into the college football playoffs, in my opinion.